Welcome back to another exciting episode of 60 Plus Uncensored. I'm your host, Seb Fry, and today's guest is Michael J. Dorfman, a certified health and nutrition life coach, author of The Longevity Wellness Revolution, and an international voice for healthy longevity, purpose, and vitality later in life. In our interview, Michael shares how life after 80 does not have to be about decline, limitation, or simply adding more years to the calendar, but instead can become what he calls the fifth stage of life, a chapter defined by energy, creativity, plant-powered nutrition, movement, mindset, purpose, and joy. So without further ado, let's get into it. Michael, thank you so much for spending some time with me here today on 60 Plus Uncensored. I'm very excited to have you as a guest. Now, all of my audience may not yet be familiar with yourself, so if you wouldn't mind, just take a moment and tell us, who is Michael Dorfman and what are you all about?
Okay, well, thanks for the invitation. Glad to be here. Well, I was born in 1942. That was during the World War II, so I go back a ways. And this year I was 84 years old. So I'm living, thriving in my 80s. And I suppose what I'm all about is that I'm trying to share this message with people of how possible it is and that we should be thriving beyond the 70s. We should be thriving in our 80s, 90s, and beyond. And that's what life is about as you get older. So I became interested in health in the 1970s. In 1976, I actually I became a vegetarian. And although I was feeling very well, most of the time I was getting sick every year. My brother, who was plant-based at that time for about 10 years, he said, well, maybe your problem is the dairy. So I wasn't able to, ready to give up dairy at that time because I love pizza, I love cheese. And for many people, that's even harder to give up than meat. So eventually I started reading more and about plant-based foods. And it was the China Study was a book that had a great influence on me. It was written by T. Colin Campbell, 1980s. It was a 20-year study in China about cancer and the causes of cancer in China. He was actually contracted by the premier of China, who was Zhou Enlai at that time, and he brought a research team across to China, worked with the Chinese teams. And they did this study. It was a 20-year study in finding out why is it that some areas of the country were having more, cases of cancer than other areas. And actually, Zhou Enlai passed away from cancer. So it was that book had a great influence on me. And it was 18 years ago that I became plant-based. And those problems I had at that time went away. And I've been enjoying my life since then. So what you eat, what your fuel is a very important part of aging well and healthy. And it's among other things, which I practice as well, that brought me to the point where I've written 2 books on health. My first book I wrote in 2019 was The Thriving Vegan, which was focused almost 100% on plant-based foods as being the main source of our illnesses. And I then went on 2 years ago, I wrote another book, which I sort of got off the topic. It was a book, it was Information Warfare, The Battle for Truth and Freedom. And I was getting into this whole manipulation of information that was happening on many topics, including geopolitics around the world. I wrote this book, I started it during the pandemic, so it was all about misinformation. And that was my second book, and 2 years ago that was. And my third book, which is the book I just finished, just came out, The Longevity Wellness Revolution, is what I'm all about now. So I've sort of evolved to this place I am now. And it's interesting because the other 2 books had really had a big influence on this book, because we're still, we're going through a lot of information warfare where, manipulation, information is being manipulated, even in the health industry, and has a lot to do with why we're sick.
Totally, totally. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. And, I'm not a vegan. I'm not even a vegetarian. And I personally focus more on getting away from highly processed foods. But what is it about meat and dairy specifically that is so unhealthy? Like, why is plant more healthy than, a hamburger or whatever?
Well, I think the main reason for me is the fiber. Why plants are so healthy for us and so necessary for us, because fiber is the favorite food of the gut bacteria. And the gut bacteria, well, it's in our gut. 70% of our gut bacteria, the healthy bacteria, well, all bacteria, all of the microbiome, 70% is in our gut. But the microbiome, which comes out to about 36 trillion different 36 trillion microbes that we are living within our body and on our body. And in the gut, which is so important because, they're discovering more and more how the gut is sort of like a source of many of the chronic diseases we have. It's a source of our wellness as well. So when it ends up that the good bacteria in your gut, in the colon, thrives on fiber, and fiber comes only from plants, then you could see why plants are so necessary. I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't eat meat, you shouldn't eat dairy, but because I used to believe that when I wrote my first book. I was like, that's what I was all about. But now I'm seeing it differently, and I see that even though I'm whole food plant-based, the important thing is forget about what you want to get rid of. I'm not focusing on that or eliminate. What I'm focusing on is getting more fiber into your diet, because 95% of the people on the Western diet, or the standard American diet, don't even get close to the minimum requirement of fiber, whereas women are supposed to be eating, I think, 25 grams a day, and men 38 grams of fiber, and both are getting about 15 grams. So we're not even getting close to it, and that's probably the foundation of why we're getting so sick, and we don't seem to be able to change things around. This has been going on for decades. And, I just mentioning it, we've always been meat and dairy based. Even when I go back to the Basic 7 in the 50s, when I grew up, school, it was always been, always been the basis of our diets, the recommended diets. And this still is, even in the latest diet guidelines, it's still basically meat and dairy and eggs as the foundation. And we need to change it around because we need more fiber. But it's not only the fiber, it's also the antioxidants that come from plants, polyphenols come from plants. We get that healthy stuff because it grows from the ground. And the problem sometimes, when you talk about the animal products, most people, 95% of the people are eating meat from the factory farms. And we know what they're being fed. They're not being fed the plants that the cows should be eating. They're being, eating, whether it's corn and soy, GMO corn and soy. They're also in very close locations, so they get a lot of the, fertilizers are used on the plants, antibiotics. 85% of the antibiotics that are even produced are going to these animal places, the factory farms. So we're getting a lot of extra baggage that's coming with the food we eat from the factory farms, whether it's it's cows, whether it's pigs, whether it's chickens. it's all the same. It's a lot of baggage goes with. We're getting the hormones that they're given in order to fatten up. So that's what I guess, it comes down to it, that plants are healthier than, eating animal foods. But that's what I'm saying, add more, and the more you add, you should start, not, maybe not immediately, but if you add more plants to your diet, eventually you should be getting some rewards. Maybe the rewards of people losing weight, maybe the rewards of feeling more energy, feeling lighter in general. But I think that, that's basically all I wanted to mention about, the fiber and how fiber eventually leads, the lack of fiber eventually leads to problems in the gut. That's not the only reason. We're talking about, other things that have, the drugs we take also affects our gut bacteria, the pesticides, a lot of things that are in our environment. But, here I am talking about, what we eat.
Well, I am really interested in what we eat, actually. And so I have been for, 2 or 3 years now on a concerted effort to get more fiber. And so I'm always looking for higher fiber foods that I can eat. So a lot of our listeners probably really don't have an idea, actually, what plant-based foods are especially high in fiber. Can you suggest some to our listeners so they can get an idea of what they should be eating in greater quantity? Because it's pretty hard to hit that recommended number of grams of fiber. I know because I try. And actually, I've been told you should eat like 2 or 3 times more than the recommended amount of fiber is what I've been told. So what plants are especially high in fiber?
Well, the plants, I guess what I eat, the plants that are high in fiber are the green plants, the leafy vegetables. We have the cruciferous vegetables, spinach and kale and cauliflower, and we also have the beans, the grains, the cereals, the seeds, and the nuts. There is so many ways to get fiber, and these are very strong sources that we can rely on. And I just, for me, I'll tell you the truth, I don't even go into how many grams I'm getting. I'm 84 years old, and I'm saying, how do I feel? How much energy do I feel on a daily basis? How excited I am about being alive. It's so many things that are part of this whole tool chest of things that come from the plant world, about lifestyle changes. But when I'm talking about fiber, I'm talking about eat more plant-based foods, a variety of color. The more colorful plants you eat, the more different type of fibers you're going to get, and just add more, and you'll see it's going to pick up. And it's interesting because you go back to the hunter-gatherers. People, we have this belief, I think most people have the belief that the hunter-gatherers lived, and their main supply of food was meat, and they didn't get much fiber because they just, they went from animal to animal, then that's what they became. They were called the hunters, but they were the gatherers. And the gatherers were the ones, they say mostly it was the women who gathered the plants, whether it was tubers, whether it's small plants. There are 30,000 edible plants in nature. And at that time, that was the same thing. There were so many edible plants in nature, and we only eat like 155 different types of plants. So it's there, and that's what they ate. And how do I know that they ate a lot of fiber, the hunter-gatherers? Because they found it in the poop that they found, the fossilized poop in the hunter-gatherers. And sometimes they even reached close to 100 grams. So they had a lot of a lot of fiber in in their nutrition, and that's what we need to do. We need to go back because we need to change the momentum away from getting sick, away from getting chronic diseases, not only in the U.S., not only in the West, but worldwide. I mean, all the chronic diseases are increasing worldwide. So we're getting sicker and sicker.
They sure are. We sure are getting sicker and sicker. And I do want to talk about chronic disease shortly here. But before I ask about that, I also take Metamucil fiber capsules. I take 7 of those bad boys a day. That's psyllium husk, right, which is corn husk, essentially. Psyllium fiber, which is corn husk. Is that okay? Is that good or bad? Do you know anything about that?
No, that's fine. That's absolutely fine because it comes from a natural source. I think one of the ways of I guess, testing whether you're getting enough fiber is, having a regularity every day, at least once, a good regularity. And to me, that's a good sign that, the digestive system is working well, that that's one of the reasons that we have fiber. Is for the digestive system that it goes through, and we have regular movements every day. But the fiber is also what happens with the fiber. The fiber goes through. You eat your fiber. It goes through the digestive system, and it doesn't get digested, and it's the food that goes to the gut bacteria, the good bacteria. And when the gut bacteria, it ferments the fiber, and it turns the fiber into short-chain fatty acids, the main one being butyrate, and acetate is another one. And what this does, one of the problems we have, which is very notable and is increasing year after year, are the colon problems we have, especially colon cancer. It's skyrocketing the number of people who are getting colon cancer under 50 years of age. So, one of the things that happens when you don't get enough fiber is I think we've heard of leaky gut. What happens? The gut is there to protect what we eat on the inside from getting into the bloodstream. And so when we don't, it isn't only the food. When we don't get enough fiber and we start eating ultra processed foods, like you're saying, it starts feeding the bad bacteria, which we don't want to feed. So feeding the growth of the bad bacteria eventually gets to the point, but it's not only that, it's not only the food, it's also the antibiotics, it's also, the other things that enter our body, the pesticides, the glyphosate, all these things are entering the body, and they are, there's a danger of that the wall of the intestines starts getting perforated. And once it does, once they start getting, the what's inside the gut starts getting into the outside of the gut, it's causing problems because it gets into the bloodstream. And what happens is that the immune system, because I heard one of your, what do you call it, the one by I forgot his doctor, he's talking about the inflammation.
Inflammation, so, right.
Yeah, so it gets through the gut, and the immune system is like, what's going on here? It's like, what is all this stuff in the bloodstream that's that's not supposed to be here? So what it does, it starts reacting because by what the immune system does, it starts searching around where to attack in order to deal with these foreign properties. And what it does, and when it does, it starts overreacting and causing inflammation, where it's actually, inflammation in could be in the joints, could be in the muscles, could be in the different tissues in our body, the lungs, the brain. So it starts causing inflammation, and once inflammation, inflammation, we all know has its, it has its purpose. To when it deals with, cuts and bruises and when we get infections. But when it overreacts, it becomes a chronic, because when people don't take care of their gut, this thing continues and continues, and then you end up getting autoimmune diseases and other diseases, and that's what chronic inflammation, is about. So this is what we want to prevent. So we want to get the production of the short chain fatty acids will help our organs, the health of our organs, the health of our tissues, the health of our brain, the health of our skin, and the gut bacteria is really interesting, because the bacteria, not the gut bacteria, the microbiome. The microbiome is not only in the gut. The microbiome is all over our body. We are swimming in an ocean of microbiome. And it's on our skin, it's in our brain, and our mouth has a microbiome, and they're all ready to take care of us if we treat it well. So that is our part. That's why we have to take the responsibility of taking care of ourselves and trusting our body to heal us. And it just grows where we can go from here.
Yeah. Totally. I'm so glad that you are bringing all of this up. And actually, I wanted to go back a little bit to the hunters and gatherers and their 100 grams of fiber in their poop, because that brings me back to like something I've heard a long time for like all my life. I don't forget the exact quote, but it's something like the key to good health is sound elimination, right? And they were talking about like having good poops, and like you hear about how a lot of people like they have like chronic diarrhea or like irritable bowel syndrome, or they're constantly constipated, right? And so it's like all of these things are like you have digestive issues, and a lot of people, I think they just really just kind of blow it off, like, oh, I've always been like that or whatever. But that's basically your body telling you that something is wrong, right? Something is wrong with your digestive tract, and probably that's going to show up in many different ways in your actual day-to-day everything, right? Your cognition, your sleep, your energy level, inflammation, ability to fight infections and diseases, right? So I think if people are listening to this podcast, and you're 84 years old, I'll bet you're probably a pretty regular guy, right? But I'll bet you that a lot of other people who are listening to this are not very regular, right? And they don't want to talk about it with a doctor or a nutritionist or even their spouse, right? But really what they're sitting on is kind of like, like a gigantic flashing warning sign from their body telling them that they need to get their gut microbiome in order. And so, like you mentioned colon cancer just now, right? And so my personal, I am not an expert in anything really, but I think that that the amount of processed foods and the little fiber that we have in our diet today is probably what's driving the bulk of the really astronomical increase in colon cancer today. It's from basically what we are putting into our bodies. I am pretty sure about that. So thank you so much for bringing that all up. And I also wanted to mention or ask you more about this book, The China Study. And the reason I'm interested in that is because long ago, man, I don't know, 10 years ago or whatever, I heard about a study that was done from like Hawaiian agricultural workers, right? So like 100 years ago, whatever, they were importing people from the Philippines and Japan mostly to work in the agricultural fields in Hawaii, right? And when all those guys came over, they would live to like 80, 90 years old, never have any kind of chronic illness really at all. And then they would just, get to whatever, they would die. Everybody does, right? But they didn't have a history of the kind of like, heart disease and cancer and stuff like that we routinely have here. But then all of their kids did. All of their kids did because, or their kids, I shouldn't say all of their kids did, all of their kids started having the exact same, preponderance of those diseases as any American person did, right? And that was linked basically to the change in diet because they got away from eating rice and like fish with like a little bit of chicken or whatever, right? And then a lot of leafy greens. They got away from that and they started eating cheeseburgers and fries. And so that really made me wonder what this book, The China Study, says. Can you share more? Have you, what do you know about that book, The China Study?
Yeah, well, the China Study by T. Colin Campbell. Actually, T. Colin Campbell, he was a biologist, and now he's in his 90s now. He's still very active. So they found out because they did they went into the rural areas of China. I think they went into over 160 different communities, and they saw that, and they were seeing, well, what are these people eating? And they were eating very different from what they were eating in the cities. And in the cities, they were eating more meat, more processed foods as well. And in the rural areas, they were very basic foods. They were eating, simple foods. The rice was a big thing. Well, of course, it's China, rice and beans. They were just eating simply. And then the amount of, it was very rare, so many of the chronic diseases in these rural areas. I'm sure have a lot to do with their lifestyle because they weren't in the big cities, they were living in nature. But this was what they found in the, as far as the food was concerned. So these were the conclusions that came from it, and this had a tremendous effect on Campbell's way from then on. He went on to write another book, which was Whole, which is a WHOLE, about whole foods and the dealing, what is it called, holistic treatment of ourselves, of our bodies. In other words, it's it gets into the topics of we are not just made up of different organs. We are a whole body. The whole body has to be treated as one, whether it's emotionally, physically, spiritually, and mentally. We are all one, and that's the way the body works, as one whole. Whereas when you get into you find specialists, you have specialist doctors, you have a lung specialist, a heart specialist, and another specialist, and they don't see the body as a whole so much because they're specializing. So it's like, oh, I deal with the heart, don't bother me with the liver, don't bother me with the lungs. So so what was the question again?
About the China Study, and you were saying how the guy wrote that book called Whole, which that also is very interesting to me because, like, you do have this, like here's the thing, like if I get run over by a truck, I want to go to an emergency room in the United States or someplace. I don't want to go to a acupuncturist if I get run over by a truck, right? I think that that Western medicine is very good with treating acute crisis care, right? Like I will give them their props. They're great about that. But they like doctors know nothing really about nutrition, right? I mean, they are siloed into these specialties, as you're saying, and that most of them really don't look at the whole enchilada, right? They just look at, some certain parts. And like there are GP, like general practitioners, right? Like my uncle who just retired at 70, he's now retired from being a doctor. He was a GP all of his career, right? But most doctors don't want to be GPs because that's not where the money is. The money is in specialization. And it's not really like the whole, I mean, you talk about like, misinformation, right? You said that's what one of your books is about, right? So it's like the whole medical practice in a medical industry is kind of basically built on misinformation, right? I mean, like, because if you get like diabetes, for example, right? Like, why is there no cure for diabetes? Where they say, well, because like they're making just so much money treating diabetes, right? Like it's not in the best interest of the medical industry to actually cure diabetes. Even though I think that, that you can cure type 2 diabetes largely on your own through going to a plant-based diet, right? I mean, mostly, right? But they don't talk about that, right? Like you get diabetes and they want to give you insulin, right? And they might give you like a cursory talk about like how you should, eat better and like get more exercise or whatever, but they don't really tell you the whole game, right? Which is that, your whole body is rejecting essentially what you've been feeding it this whole entire time, and you need to make a radical change in your health.
Yeah, and exactly what you're saying, but the it's the money, you know, where's the money coming from? And it's, not only, well, it's a drug industry, pharmaceutical industry. The doctors go through their training, and much of the support and what they learn, it comes from the pharmaceutical. They have tremendous they're close to trillion-dollar industries. It's not only the pharmaceutical industry; it's also the agricultural and the dairy industry. I mean, they have investors, they have stockholders, and so they not only they funding the studies, but they're behind the studies. So you find out, well, people read studies that, oh, this is good for you. Milk is good for you, or this thing is good for you, butter is good. But you got to find, well, who wrote this study? So much of it is, so many studies are supported by all this money. Is so powerful. Where you go into the plant food, the plant industry, the health industry, it's like there's no money there. There's no comparison. So and the pharmaceutical. I want to tell you just a little story about that really changed my life and why I really wanted to share and help other people. And this happened 2 years after I became plant-based. That was like 16 years ago. A friend of mine and of my wife, Beatrice, because I live in, by the way, I've been living in Mexico for 53 years. So I was born in Brooklyn, New York, but I've been living the last part of my, large part of my life.
Me encanta México, es mi país favorito de todos en el mundo.
Qué bueno, qué bueno. Viva México.
Viva México, Dios mío.
Yeah. Okay. So, Beatrice, she had a heart attack, and she went to the hospital that was in Merida, which is part of the Yucatan. We were living in Cancun then, where we lived for 30 years. So Beatrice had a surgery, a quadruple bypass surgery, and it was successful. She went home, and for a year she was doing okay. She was a pretty successful artist. A year passed, and all of a sudden she started complaining about pain in her arm. And they called her back into the hospital. And what was happening, because when you go through quadruple surgery, you get rid of the aorta, which was clogged because you weren't eating properly. So it was replaced by a vein from her leg. And so for a year it was working. But then she started complaining about the pain, brought her back into the hospital, and they told her that they needed to put a stent in, which is fairly normal after, a year or two after you get the surgery, because you're not taking care of the cause of the problem. So they couldn't put the stent in. It was too wide. The vein was too narrow. I don't know if that would have happened anywhere else, in the U.S., maybe it wouldn't. But they sent her home. They told her they couldn't do anything. What they didn't tell her, and they told my wife and they told her son, is she had about 6 months to live. So she went back home, not knowing this. And at that time, I was doing a lot of reading. I was reading about heart surgeons and doctors that were having success through plant-based nutrition in reversing heart disease. And the main one was Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who wrote the book Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, which at the very top of it says, the book that changed Bill Clinton's life, because he didn't want to do more stents, and he read the book. So Esselstyn was a top surgeon. He was chief of staff at the Cleveland Clinic, maybe the top heart clinic in the U.S. and maybe among the top in the world. Every year he was saying, what is going on here? It keeps getting worse. Our technology is improving. We have more drugs. Our people are well trained, and it gets worse every year. And it's still getting worse, heart disease all over the world. So anyway, I found out, I read the book, and I read other books, and I decided to give this book to Beatrice. I still didn't tell her that what the doctors expected from her. She read the book. She said she was going to make the change to a plant-based diet. And instead of living 6 months, she lived almost 10 years. And to me, it was like, wow, what an impact. Imagine that. This impact on me, just reading this about other people having this success. And I was able to help a friend. And I started thinking, what is going on here? You know, how is it possible that doctors don't know that a plant-based diet would have such an impact, you know, and should be, even after you go through heart surgery, at least put people on plants so they can live longer, so they can have better results. It's not even considered. When she got through the surgery, the first meal she had bacon, they gave her bacon and eggs. So at the hospital. So, and then you just learn, you know, it's the drugs, you know, the drugs. Manage your disease, you know. You have heart disease, you know, and this is not only with heart disease, then you find out that there are other diseases, you know, like you mentioned, like type 2 diabetes, you know, and osteoporosis, obesity, which is, we were never this fat years ago. You know, and it's infecting Mexico as fat as the U.S., you know, and
they're fatter.
You know.
They won. They're like 1% fatter than the Americans are now.
Okay. So this had a tremendous, you know, so we're talking about, you know, the power of the money, you know, because, and what you said, it's like doctors aren't, you know, they don't learn about nutrition and other lifestyle practices that they need to know. But, you know, you go to a doctor's appointment and you get 10 minutes, but if a doctor is supposed to really treat you and treat you holistically, they want to find out about you. Doctors don't care that much. Not all doctors, but most doctors, they don't have the time because time is money. And in order to find out what a person needs, you got to talk for 20 minutes, a half hour. You know, what do you eat? What do you do? What is your lifestyle like? You know, are you stressed out in your life? Man, it's a whole thing there. But unfortunately, that's where we're at, you know.
Yeah, that's the way that it's structured. You know, I mean, I certainly don't have the answer to like how to like reboot the Western medical industry or the U.S. medical industry so that they actually begin to look at the whole person.
Yeah.
But it comes down to like patient advocacy, right? I mean, like you were your wife's advocate, right? I mean, like you were the one out there, and I have spent very little time in front of doctors, but you know, like they are usually not advocates for you, the patient. They're usually advocates for the hospital or the insurance company, right? I mean, like that's really who they're advocating for, not you. And you know, everybody needs to be sort of, you know, informed because they're not going to inform you. And I don't mean to say every single doctor is bad. There's many great doctors. I'm sure my uncle was a fabulous doctor. But nevertheless, you need to be informed, especially about what you're putting in your mouth, because like food is medicine, essentially, right? Or food is poison, right? I mean, like it's one or the other. I guess there are some foods which are just sort of like neutral, right? You know, but you know, you really need to understand the kind of impacts that what you are putting in your mouth are going to have to you. And also, like, okay, you mentioned Beatrice, right? She was given a 6-month prognosis. She or whatever, you know, lifespan left, and she lived 10 more years. And like Bill Clinton, who like had like serious heart disease, and like that guy looks actually pretty good, really. I saw him just the other day at the Obama library thing, right? You know, like he's probably your age, right? Like a little younger than you. You actually look fabulous too, which I want to talk about in a second. But it's because they had a radical change in their diet. And so like reversing heart disease, I think that a lot of people, when they get older, you know, they think that it's just too late for them. They just think it's too late for them to like reboot their life, to like learn a new lifestyle and like improve their lives. But I think that the studies that have been done about it show the exact opposite, that really it's almost never too late to adapt a plant-based diet. Do you know much about like changing your diet later in life? Have you read any studies about that, or?
Yeah, it's well, just the fact that you mentioned about type 2 diabetes, you know, you can reverse it, or you can at least slow it down and stabilize it within weeks. You know, but I don't know if we want to get into this, that you know, people think the problem is people think that diabetes, that sugar is the culprit. is the enemy. But the sugar is not the enemy. Sugar is like a symptom. The enemy is the fat. Is the fat we eat, which, going back to animal foods, that the fat gets into the. That's why, when you lose weight, when you're in type 2 diabetes, you start losing a lot of weight, get down to a more normal weight, you start feeling better. And the reason is that because when fat goes into the muscles, it stays there in the muscles or in the liver. And the problem is that even though the sugar is there, the glucose is there, the fat is preventing the insulin of bringing the sugar into the cells because the fat is blocking it. So what happens is that, this is a basic explanation, is that the fat ends up in the blood system. Not the fat, the sugar ends up in the blood because it can't get into the cells. So not only is the sugar not ending up in the blood, it's that we're not getting the glucose that we need to feel the energy as we get older. And that's what I'm all about also, is about we need to feel energy. One of the terrible symptoms of getting old, people complain, is that they don't have any energy. They're exhausted. They're just, and that when you don't have energy, it's like you don't want to do anything. When you have the energy, it's like you get up in the morning and you're ready to do things, just like you did when you were in your 20s and 30s. So that's one of the problems, is that so we have to focus more. So when you start learning that and say, okay, is that true what I'm saying? Well, the only way you're going to find out it's true what I'm saying is, try it. Try losing weight, which is, it's not that easy for a lot of people. But you learn, that maybe that, animal products which contain this fat, and meat is fattening. Maybe, going back to the hunter-gatherers, they were killing wild animals that had, 15% fat because they were running around all the time. They were on farms, factory farms where they're stuck there getting fat and fat. Why? Because there's money in selling fat cows. And that's what we eat,
we eat fat cows. So, but talk about fat, right? So there's a lot of people who say that, fat is good, right? And so, but there's good fat and there's bad fat, right? So there's saturated fat and unsaturated fat. And so I understand saturated fat to be largely animal fat, the kind of fat that at room temperature, it's going to congeal and become solid. Like after you cook up your bacon, love the bacon, and you pour out the fat, you pour it into a cup or whatever, and in an hour or two, it's a solid mass. That's saturated fat. That's what gets clogged up in your arteries and in your organs, right? But then there's unsaturated fat, which is the fat that mostly comes from plants. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. You could have the unsaturated, well, you can get avocado, you have the olive oil. That's another subject because I'm very thin. So I just eat, I eat avocado, I'll eat, I'll eat bread, I'll eat a certain amount of fats that come from plants naturally. But when fats are taken out of the plant and made into, oils, oil is basically liquid fat. It's very high calorie, and when you take the oil out of the original plant we're talking about, or the seed, it almost completely loses its nutrition properties. And one of the book by Esselstyn called Dr. Esselstyn, he's always against any fat, any oil.
Really?
Any oil, including olive oil. One of the main reason, well, it's not only because of the calories, but when you go to him, he takes these rejects. Well, I wouldn't say rejects. People who are very, very advanced in heart disease, in cardiovascular disease. His diets are very strict. So there's no nuts, almost nothing with fats. And I never mentioned this. So he was taking these people, he was having a 95% success rate with the plant-based diet. So people weren't even able, some of them aren't able to even walk from one side of the room to the other without having problems. So he was taking these from the Cleveland Clinic, he was putting them on his specific diet, and 95%, they were living 10, 15 years longer instead of a few months like they were predicted. So these are actual things that were happening. And anyway, so the oils, what the Esselstyn came up with was that the oils destroy the epithelial cells of the arteries. Really? And the epithelial cells of the arteries, of course, they cannot produce nitric acid. And nitric acid is the reason why arteries can expand and contract, and also that it acts like a Teflon, that things don't stick to the side of the arteries. And that's one of the reasons that we get hardening of the arteries when we get older. So that's the reason, and that's why I stay. It's 18 years now. My wife, she never cooks with oil, so ever, and we stay away from oil. I'm limited in the amount of restaurants I can go to, even plant-based restaurants. Vegan restaurants. They, of course, people love oil, especially olive oil. Now, if you're going to use oil, don't fry with it. Just understand, this is my point of view from what I've researched, understand that, it's not that healthy oil. And stay away from oil. Olive oil, what is it, the best one?
Coconut oil?
The best olive oil that's considered...
Extra virgin olive oil.
Extra virgin olive oil, you want to have some of that. But coconut oil is not healthy at all. It is the highest amount, of what do you call it, saturated fat in oils, in plant oils, and it's supposed to be connected to the bad cholesterol. So I would stay away from, and a lot of people believe there was a whole fad for a long while about, that's it, coconut oil.
Coconut oil,
but
it's going to save us.
But fads come and go, and they're always, we'll get into this now, and then we'll get into that, and so I just go with the basics, and that's what keeps me healthy.
Yeah, so I've heard that actually, the cooking oils, a lot of the issue that makes cooking oils unhealthy is that you cook with them, and that if you did not actually cook with them, except for seed oils, right? So corn oil, all that stuff, that's all bad apparently, even if you take it at room temperature. But olive oil, if you use that for salad dressing or whatever, that kind of thing, it's or some people even drink olive oil, have a shot or two of olive oil a day, right? They just take a shot of it. That's actually not bad, but it's really the cooking. There's something in the cooking process that does destroy whatever nutrients is there and transforms the oil from something that could be beneficial to something that is not so beneficial. So thank you for mentioning that. Because you mentioned nuts having high in fiber, and so I eat a crap ton of berries and nuts, right? That's basically my snack food, berries and nuts. But I really try to cut back on the nuts because the nuts are they're so high. I could eat 1,000 calories of nuts in 15 minutes, right? I mean, it's just so easy to overeat nuts. But they're high in fat, right? So now you're telling me that really is it not good to eat that many? Because the books I've read said, okay, well, you can eat as many nuts as you want to, but it's just know that they're high in calories. But now you're telling me that actually there's some other risks to eating nuts that I maybe not.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting because Esselstyn says if you're not a good health, you have problems with the heart, stay away from the nuts. If you're okay and you're healthy, you can eat some. So. It was interesting because I used to distribute nuts. I used to distribute macadamia nuts and what do you call it? What was the other nuts I did?
Hazelnuts.
I'll think of it in a moment. No, it wasn't hazelnuts. It was
cashews.
Cashews and macadamia. I used to eat so many. I couldn't help it. It was like we had
They're
5 kilos. They're delicious, you know. I used to eat a bag of 5 kilos in there, everything. But I stopped delivering because of, problems with the deliveries and everything. And I feel so much better. So I buy nuts, but I put some in my breakfast when I have breakfast, that walnuts is supposedly the healthiest. So I eat the walnuts for breakfast.
Yeah, the least tasty one is the healthiest.
Yeah, almonds. Actually, we make our own almond milk because, buying almond milk in the stores is like 2% almonds because they're so expensive. Because I get organic also. So, no, 2% almonds. When you make it at home, you get 10% of the almond, percent almonds in there. So I keep away, but I eat nuts, because, it's a good food, if you're feeling okay. And just to make sure that and I don't need to eat, handful of nuts every day. But
yeah, well, I eat them a lot because, like, here in America, like when I'm out looking for healthy stuff, because I'm on the road a lot, right? Like I'm a realtor, I drive around all the time, right? So I'm constantly not in a place where there's good, like any gas station has nuts, right? So like that's like oftentimes the least processed food I can find in a gas station is nuts, right? And so like a lot of times I'm just eating nuts all over the place. So I go to the supermarket, and in the supermarket there's actually not that much whole food. There's berries in great supply and nuts, but a lot of other stuff is highly like almost everything is, they say buy at the edges of the supermarket, right? Well, the edge of the supermarket, there's like limited selection of things at the edges. But I do want to talk to you also about your energy level, because you mentioned at the outset that you changed to a plant-based diet, but then you said you do some other things. So like, you look great, man. I wish because you're 30 years older than I am, 29 years older than I am, like I would just love to have the amount of energy that you have. You look great. So what else are you doing besides the plant-based diet to like maintain your physique and your energy level and all of that?
Well, you're 55 then.
That's it.
My son is 55. He was just 55 last month.
Right on. How's he doing?
He's doing fine. He's a sculptor here in Mexico. So energy, it's the plants, it's the fuel that I don't have so much baggage. My body doesn't have that much baggage to take care of. If your body's working on diseases or eliminating this and eliminating that, and having problems with the cells, we need to get the energy to the cells. It's like, the energy goes to the cells. We want to make sure that the cells are getting the glucose, because that's their number one energy source. So you want to make sure that the glucose is getting into cells, mitochondria, and that because, the mitochondria is like a battery. It wants to get, the energy. So what I do besides, I do breath holds. I don't know, it's called also intermittent hypoxia, which is fantastic. I love it every morning. And this was inspired by my son, who's into somatic healing. He does breath work, and I do breath work also. But the breath holds, because most of us don't understand that we have always over a 95% saturation of oxygen in the body. The problem is, and it's always that way, is that we don't always get the oxygen we need into the cells. So what is it? What allows our cells or our lungs to release oxygen to go into the cells? And it's the CO2 level, carbon dioxide. We think that, CO2, we breathe it out. It's the waste production, the waste. But it's the CO2 in our body that makes us breathe, take that breath. So when our CO2 level goes low, we have oxygen in the body, but we need the CO2 to take the oxygen into the cell. So that's what breath hold. First of all, you have to breathe from the nose. That's important. because a lot of people breathe from the mouth, and it's very short. We're not getting it deep into the lungs, so we're getting short breaths, and the breaths aren't what our body, when you go through the nose, it goes through a labyrinth, and then it gets warmed, gets filtered. When it goes, gets rid of some of the bacteria, things you don't need, and then it picks up more of the what do you call it? What I just mentioned with the
filtering
nitric
out.
acid. Nitric acid. Nitric acid is up here, and it picks it up, and it goes into the lungs, and it opens up the lungs. So we need to start breathing from the nose. And I had a problem of sleep apnea, because people have sleep apnea. They're not breathing from the nose; they're breathing from the mouth, and that's one of the problems. And I had that problem, which I finally learned how to breathe through my nose. So anyway, so we need to. So what happens with the what do you call it, breath holds, is that the hypoxia, you get to the point where you're reducing the level of oxygen in your blood, and to a certain point, and then you're increasing the level of the CO2, and it gets to a point where you have to breathe, because the level of CO2 is so high and the body's requiring the oxygen. And then when you breathe in, it just explodes with oxygen throughout your body, and you feel it. I mean, you're going through a feeling of energy, a tremendous amount of energy in your body, while you're feeling calmness at the same time. It's like it's just a feeling of just being thriving at a moment, because you allowed this to happen. And I just want to mention something that, when you deep sea divers, they use this, they don't, deep sea divers will go down, they'll go down many meters, maybe 200 feet or something like that, stay down there for many minutes. They don't go take a deep breath and they go down. They're using this way of breathing. Same reason. I don't know if you've heard of Wim Hof. He takes people. Yeah, he's the Iceman, but he teaches how to breathe. He takes people up to the Everest, and without the oxygen, people learn to breathe without oxygen up there, when the normal person couldn't live up there. And the Sherpas, the ones who they know about these breathing techniques. So the people who dive into the water and go deep in there, they can stay for many minutes. They go for records. They're the ones who are doing this, the breath hold, the hypoxia, intermittent hypoxia, which they learn how to breathe. And you can stay down for, some stay down for 10, 15 minutes without breathing. Amazing.
Yeah, actually, I just heard about this because I was just in Croatia. And this was in the news when I was in Croatia last week. The world record was just set by a Croatian for staying underwater without breathing. 29 minutes staying underwater without breathing. I mean, that is unbelievable, right? It
is, totally, right?
I would think you would be dead. I think you suffocate after like
totally.
5 minutes, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's the truth. I understand this now because I've been reading. There's this book called Breath. I forgot it was. Breath was being used thousands of years ago by ancient civilizations for curing disease. The yogis, they knew about this, but we don't have this information. We're just what we do now has nothing to do with what ancient civilizations. So they were dealing with healing through breath work, and there's a way. In other words, you can actually slow down your heart rate through breathing, and there's a way you can reduce your stress. That's what I do. If I feel stressed out, I'll take there's certain rhythms of breathing. The parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system control, we're either in one or the other. And the parasympathetic nervous system is when we're calm, we're easy, our digestion is good, we're relaxed. And the sympathetic is when our system is ready for the day. We're doing activities, we're active. It's like, so When you're in stress, your heartbeat usually speeds up, and you can. So when you breathe in, you're in the sympathetic nervous system, and when you breathe out, it's the parasympathetic. So your breathing out should be longer than the breathing in, if you want to calm down. So you take in 4 breaths in and 8 breaths out. And you do that for several minutes. So I do it when I feel like it's a need, I got to calm down, and so, or when you want to go to sleep. Because the problem we have also, when we go to sleep, what do? We watch TV, we watch these crime and violence on the TV screen until 9 o'clock at night, 9:30, and so we're in that hyper thing. We're not, we have to calm down. So the way of, getting calming down or winding down at night is to, wind down and not to get involved in this type of things. So that's what I try to do at night, and part of it is the breathing and just relax so that the melatonin, which is the sleep hormone, can go in. And of course, you get older, it's like you have problems sleeping. A lot of people have, and sometimes I deal with that too. Anyway, this is another thing.
Another key to your vigor and energy level. And the breathing is something that I am becoming more attuned to. I've not really started yet, like doing like a better breath practice, but I note that like a lot of people who teach the meditation begin with like breath work, right? Like that's how they begin a meditation, is by doing what you say, right? Breathe in for 4, out for 8, right? And all that. I think there's a lot to it. Also, I mean, I have an Apple Watch. A lot of people do. There is a breath app on your Apple Watch, right? It's supposed to tell you to like remind you throughout the day to take some time out to breathe. And so I turned that feature off a long time ago because it bugged me, always telling me to breathe all the time. But now that you mentioned it, I'm going to find out how to turn that back on. Unfortunately, Michael, we're out of time, and I feel like I could talk to you forever, because you said you're writing another book, Longevity and Wellness Revolution, and I want to talk to you about that, but unfortunately, we are out of time. You're an interesting cat, and there's so much. I want to talk to you again about Mexico, because I love Mexico so much, and I think that a lot of people in America would be interested in retiring in Mexico. So it sounds like you'd be a great guy to talk to about like day-to-day life as an expat, although you're hardly an expat anymore.
Where I live in San Miguel de Allende.
Right.
It's one like best city in the world, like 3 of the last 6 years.
I gotta go.
There are so many, because we play pickleball now, and there's thousands of expats living here. It's thousands. Like amazing.
I have to go to San Miguel. I've never been there before, but I have a client who lives there, so I need to go there and look her up. But Michael, if people want to get a hold of you to talk about any or all of this, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Well, I got my website, longevitywellnessrevolution.com, which is also the name of my latest book, The
longevitywellnessrevolution.com, huh? Okay. All right. I brought it right up. Okay. That will go into the show notes. I would be very interested to read that book. I think we should have you come back on again sometime, Michael, to talk about more about the book specifically, because longevity and wellness, they go hand in hand. And like this is what this show is all about. This show is really all about living your best life after 60, and you're living your best life, a fair ways past 80, and you don't look like you're anywhere near the end. I think in many ways you're just getting going, it seems like. Okay, Michael, thank you so much for being on 60 Plus Uncensored. I really do appreciate it. And I will catch you on the flip side.
Okay, Seb, great to be here. Thanks.
That's a wrap for this episode of 60 Plus Uncensored. Huge thanks to Michael Dorfman for setting the tone with such honesty and insight. Hey, if you like this episode, do me a favor. Do Michael a favor. Hit that subscribe button, leave a review, and share it with someone you know who needs to hear it. Oh, and by the way, if you know someone over 60 who's still out there doing big things, living boldly, working with purpose, or aging on their own terms like Michael Dorfman, I would love to hear from you. Reach out at team60plus.com or join the conversation at 60 Plus Living on Facebook. I'm Seb Fry, and this is 60 Plus Uncensored, because as we're learning, life after 60 isn't the end, it's just getting good.
Subscribe now.